Shedeur Sanders should not have fallen to the 5th round. He was a divisive prospect. For some, he was a first-round lock. For others, like myself, he was more of a day 2 guy. However, the first round came and went and 2 quarterbacks were taken. Neither were Sanders. The second round came and went. 1 quarterback was taken. Again, not Shedeur Sanders. The third round comes around. 2 quarterbacks taken. Still, neither of them are Shedeur Sanders. It's now the 3rd day of the NFL draft. The 4th round comes and goes, and still Shedeur Sanders' name is not called. At last, with the 6th pick in the 5th round, Shedeur Sanders is finally drafted to the Cleveland Browns. Even Shedeur's most vocal doubters didn't see this coming, because it shouldn't have. So how does a quarterback who at one point had the ceiling of a top 3 pick and the floor of a 2nd round pick fall all the way to the 144th overall pick? Well, I believe it's down to a combination of 4 different factors which all came together to create a perfect storm, which resulted in what can only be described as a historic fall. First, we have Shedeur Sanders as a prospect. Second, we have the backup quarterback dilemma. Third, we have the delusions of grandeur. And fourth, we have the catch-22 of Shedeur Sanders. Let me explain. Let's start with Shedeur Sanders as a prospect, because that is the reason I believe why he fell out of the first round. In my pre-draft evaluation on Sanders, which you can find on this channel, I said he was a fine quarterback who can create and win from the pocket and who throws with good anticipation and accuracy, but that he was a subpar athlete. He had a weak arm, he was averse to risky throws, held onto the ball for way too long, and came from a very odd Colorado offense, which makes his projection to the next level a bit tricky. From an evaluation point of view, the top 3 hype that Shedeur was getting was absolutely crazy, and I've been very vocal about that since the start. And as you can see, we were getting hints that the league thought the same. However, it is a quarterback-driven league, and other flawed quarterbacks like Jackson Dart still get drafted in the 1st round. So why didn't Sanders? Well, I believe the concerns around Sanders off-field and as a teammate were the driving factor in why he fell so much further than just out of the 1st round. There were a lot of reports that Shedeur interviewed poorly at the combine, with one anonymous NFL coach saying it was the worst formal interview I've ever been in my life, and called him entitled, with an AFC executive also adding it didn't go great in our interview. Jonathan Jones, an NFL insider for CBS Sports, suggested that Sanders tanked the interviews to avoid being drafted by certain teams, saying, "I was told he more or less sandbagged those interviews. I don't know if he didn't take them seriously, what it was, but he did not give it his all." Another executive told ESPN's Josina Anderson that Sanders was brash and arrogant during his interviews. Todd McShay said on his podcast that a private interview between the Giants and Shedeur did not go well, that the preparation from Shedeur wasn't there. Dable called him out on that, Shedeur didn't like that, and Dable didn't like that either. And that's not even mentioning what we know for fact, which is that Shedeur didn't throw at the combine, which yes, isn't unusual for top quarterback prospects, but as we well know now, Shedeur is not a top quarterback prospect. He also didn't practice at the East-West Shrine Bowl, blamed his offensive line for a loss against Nebraska, etc. etc. I don't know Shedeur Sanders. I've never met him, never spoken to him, but NFL teams, coaches, executives have, and they care greatly about character, which is why every year we see prospects falling due to character concerns. Sometimes it's silly, but sometimes it's justified, because we have seen great players be not great for the locker room and destabilize a franchise. Aaron Rodgers for the last few years at the Packers and the Jets. Odell Beckham Jr. It varies from case to case and player to player, but clearly it does matter. Not just in the NFL, but sports in general. Ultimately, Shedeur Sanders presented to the league as a good, not great quarterback on field, which simply was not enough to offset the concerns about him off field, which is why teams like the Giants, Saints, and Browns initially all went in a different direction at quarterback. The second factor is the backup quarterback dilemma, with the Giants, Saints, and Browns all drafting quarterbacks, and the Jets, Raiders, and presumably the Steelers all addressing their quarterback need through free agency. That meant Shedeur was looking at being a backup, and Shedeur Sanders, despite having the on-field traits to be a fantastic, very high-level backup, is actually the worst type of backup quarterback imaginable. A backup quarterback is meant to be seen and not heard, blend in with the furniture. For the most part, you don't want a competition between your starting starting quarterback and the backup quarterback. That's not to say they can't be a leader. There's plenty of players on the team who are leaders, but the nature of the quarterback position means that he is the guy, and you can't have two guys. Having the backup quarterback getting a lot of attention, whether that's from the media, fans, or within the organization itself, is not a good thing for a team. It creates a division. It splits teammates and fans as to who should be the starting quarterback, and creates an environment where coaches can be second-guessed on that very topic. This is why once great quarterbacks make for terrible backups. Take someone like Cam Newton, for example. This is not a knock on Cam. He was simply too big a personality to let the starting quarterback be the leader he needed to be. So once Sanders fell into the backup quarterback range after the midpoint of the third round, it was harder for him to be drafted because NFL teams care greatly about fit, and drafting a backup quarterback who off-field profiles like a terrible backup quarterback means that NFL teams are not going to be falling over themselves to draft you. The third factor is delusions of grandeur, partially from Sanders, but he's a 23-year-old college quarterback who just had his number retired, which is a separate issue for a separate video, so that's kind of par for the course. Where the real delusions of grandeur lie, though, are with Deion Sanders, his Hall of Fame father. Shedeur doesn't have an agent. Instead, his father represents him. Your agent's job as a prospect going through the pre-draft process is for them to ascertain a realistic draft projection and to prepare you for that, whether that's the first overall pick or UDFA. Deion has retired his son's number at Colorado, has said he doesn't want his son to play in the cold, and has said there's certain teams he doesn't want his son to go to. Deion is Shedeur's father, and it comes with the territory to believe in your son, but that's exactly the issue here. Deion can't see Shedeur for the prospect he truly is. And that's not to say that Shedeur is a bad quarterback prospect. He isn't. He's a fine one. But clearly his father was either unable or unwilling to realize that he might go later in the draft than he expected. I mean, at the NFL Honors event, Cam Jordan, a Saints player, joked about Sanders falling to the Saints at 9, to which Deion apparently seriously said, "I don't know about that," and Shedeur followed it up by saying, "Yeah, I don't think so." The delusion that both Deion and Shedeur were under about Shedeur's draft projection checks out, because you don't go and have a custom draft room built for you in your house if you're expecting to be a 5th round pick. But that's just my take. It's this intertwining of careers with Deion and Shedeur coming from Jackson State and then from Colorado, which makes Shedeur's evaluation so messy, because you have to factor in Deion Sanders and his heightened opinion of his son into all of this, and you can bet damn good money that Deion will be very vocal in the media. He has lots of links to the league. He was tweeting "thank God" after every Raiders loss. He was even at one point the odds-on favorite to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. You just know that if Deion is concerned about his son's development or playing time or how he's being managed, he is going to come on social media and make that opinion known. He is his dad after all, and he wants his son to do well. Plenty of prospects have parents who are vocal on social media if they have concerns about their son and the way he's being managed. But none of those parents are Deion Primetime Sanders, a Hall of Fame player and one of the best players to ever grace the game. His pull, his influence, his words on social media count for just a little bit more than the average parent. NFL teams and NFL front offices would be fundamentally failing in their roles of evaluating if they didn't factor all of this in. And finally, the fourth factor, the catch-22 of Shedeur Sanders. A catch-22 is a paradoxical situation. And the paradox of Shedeur Sanders is that he wasn't drafted because his father can undermine the head coach and the front office, but he was drafted because his father can undermine the head coach and the front office. Just listen to what Adam Schefter says here.
Deion Sanders, Shedeur Sanders developed a relationship during this process with the Browns owner, Jimmy Haslam.
Deion Sanders and Shedeur Sanders developed a special relationship with Jimmy Haslam during the pre-draft process. I mean, that just sums everything up and really highlights the catch-22. Coaches were right to be worried about Deion undermining them because he's already done it. That's how Shedeur Sanders got drafted. And that also probably explains why the Browns draft room, when they drafted Sanders, looks like a hostage situation. Because it wasn't their decision. The Browns draft makes no sense. Why draft Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round and then Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round, leaving you with 5 quarterbacks on the roster? Personally, I think the Browns didn't want to draft Sanders, and then Jimmy Haslam stepped in, a man who forced the Browns previously to draft Johnny Manziel, one of the biggest busts of all time, and then also as big on signing Deshaun Watson. If you could call him a bust, that would be generous, and I think he stepped in as the owner to exert some pressure. Either way, read into that situation what you will. We don't know 100%, but drafting a quarterback ahead of Shedeur Sanders doesn't exactly scream, you're our guy. And those 4 reasons all coming together is why Shedeur Sanders fell as far as he did. And I honestly don't know if we'll ever see anything like that ever again. Yes, there will be a prospect who has off-field concerns and who doesn't have first-round tape, but there will never be a prospect with that profile as hyped by the media and the fans, because there won't be another prospect with the Sanders name and all the baggage that comes with that. Who knows, maybe this is the beginning of the Sanders redemption arc, because after all, he is just another prospect trying to live out his dream of playing in the NFL. And maybe him making a name for himself away from his father is the best thing for him.